Welcome to the Weekly Roar, coming live from the Lion's Den, helping new managers become great leaders and awesome bosses. And now, here's your host, Greg Storch.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Weekly Roar. Thanks for joining me in the Lion's Den today for this week's watch party. Today, I'm talking about another concept in the foundations of leadership. But before we jump into today's topic, I'm Greg Storch, and my business is called Lion Enterprise, a leadership development and coaching business. I'm a certified professional coach and a certified leadership speaker and trainer. Hey, last week I continued my series called Follow the Leader, Concepts in the Foundations of Leadership. And I spoke about how important it is to trust your gut. We talked about having that leadership spidey sense. Hey, if you didn't catch it, you know what to do. Go to my website at www.lion-enterprise.com. Click up at the top of the page on the Lion's Pride Library, and you're going to see all my videos there. Go check them out. They're available 24/7. All right, you guys, let's go ahead and kick things off this week. Today's concept is centered around that age-old saying, birds of a feather flock together. So what exactly do I mean by that? Well, simply put, what I'm talking about is that we tend to attract people to us who are most like us, especially when they have the same qualities that we do. And I did an exercise a couple of years ago where I made a list of the qualities of the people I would either want to work with or surround myself with. And my list had 5 qualities that I desired in others. One of them was a positive attitude, being a self-starter, being trustworthy. Another one was selflessness, a focus on others. And also, the 5th one was an understanding of leadership. The funny thing is that when I looked at that list I made of the characteristics I'd want in them, they were the same characteristic traits that I have myself. Without realizing it, I was making a list of my own characteristics. The good news is that whoever we are, that's the type of person we tend to attract in our lives. Now, the thing is, these character traits can change as we change and grow. I saw this happen myself. Until I started my personal growth journey, I just wanted to have fun and enjoy life. The things that were important to me were a little different than they are to me today. Today, I have different characteristics that make me, well, me, right? And as we change and grow, you'll notice that the people around you, the people you start to surround yourself with, that group changes too. Think about the people in your circles now. Think about some of their characteristics. How would you describe them? At the end of this talk, I'm going to have you do a little exercise that's going to help you with this. The next question is, how are these people different than the people you were hanging around with years ago? Is there a difference? If so, then some of your character traits may have changed and you started attracting people who more aligned with them. When I was working in Washington, D.C., I worked at one of the federal agencies as a contractor. You've heard me talk about this before. It was when I was in IT. I was the senior program manager overseeing about 10 different teams who were delivering IT services to that agency. During the first year or so, I had the opportunity to hire the managers that were overseeing each one of those teams. Now, some of it was due to natural attrition, they just quit. And some of it had to do a lot with just being a bad fit. So I ended up removing those leaders. Now, throughout the hiring process to replace those people, I knew what I was looking for in the managers. And guess what that was? It was a lot of the things that I saw in myself. I wanted the same types of people. I had a mission and a vision to provide support at this agency, and I needed more of me. I knew what those teams needed from that new leader, and I needed the new managers I hired to align with my vision and that mission. In retrospect, I see that the people I brought in to build those teams back up were people who had very similar, if not exactly the same characteristics that I had myself. I was attracting leaders, and most importantly, the leaders I needed in my organization. Here's the big takeaway in this concept. It doesn't really matter what you want to attract. What really matters is who you are, because that is what's going to really determine what comes your way. Here's another example using the same work experience I just talked about at that federal agency in DC. I spent a lot of time creating a positive work culture for the employees on that contract. I had hundreds of them working for me, and it was a great work environment, but it wasn't always like that. And I had to work hard to turn the tables. But I did it by bringing in the right people who genuinely cared about the contractors, which is a characteristic that I shared with them. I genuinely cared about my contractors. Well, when it came to staffing, sometimes I had to rely on external staffing agencies to fill my vacancies. And for a long time, I used two companies as primary vendors. Between the two of the companies, they staffed several positions for me. Sometimes it was due to urgency. My own recruiters couldn't keep up with the demand, so we would lean on these companies to help out. My company and their companies had an agreement that we would place these people for 90 days. And if they worked out, we would then hire them as our own employees. We called it temp to perm hire. A good majority of them converted after 90 days. Why? Because I clearly defined what I was looking for up front, and I was able to attract the types of people that I was looking for. However, there were some who did leave after their 90 days for one reason or another. But I remember the recruiter, one of those recruiters from one of the companies came to me, and he's like, I have never seen a culture like this anywhere. These guys are asking me how they can get back here on your contract. They specifically wanted to be on my contract. That when they were looking for work again, they would go to these temp agencies and they're like, hey, is there an opening on the contract over at that agency? And they would say, yeah, we have this and that. No, not any work. I want to specifically work on Greg Storch's contract. I was attracting people to the contract, and it was all based on who I was. The qualities that I displayed on that contract, and I was attracting those people and I was keeping them. Now, I'm not trying to imply that everyone around you or everyone you hire is a carbon copy of you. Of course they aren't, right? I mean, we're all individuals. We're all different. Nobody's exactly the same as somebody else. Even identical twins aren't truly identical. There's something different about the two of them, right? But I'll tell you that if you take a step back and think about the individuals right now that surround you, I can guarantee there are going to be a lot more similarities than there are differences. I've given talks and I've held training on how to connect with others. And one of the biggest things that I use personally to connect with others is common ground. We tend to try to find common ground with people when we're connecting with them. The same holds true with character traits and attracting those who have similar traits as your own. Now, one of those traits that's common to find is age. As I look back on those teams, I realized that the teams that had a change in personnel after I replaced the managers, they all seemed to be similar in age after the new hires were brought in. They displayed a lot of other similar characteristics as well, but looking back on it, age was a big factor. I feel like my older managers, their team seemed to be older, and the younger ones seem to have attracted younger team members. We tend to connect. We tend to be attracted to others who are relatively close to our age. That's a characteristic we commonly see bringing people together in clusters. I mean, think about it. Do you socialize with others in personal settings like dinner parties or, getting together on the weekend? Are they usually close to your age? It's probably a factor you consider before you attend the event. I'm not usually attending events or hanging out with people who are generationally different from me on a general basis. Do I? Yes, of course I do. But in general, I tend to migrate and surround myself with people who are in the similar age group. Another really big character trait that we can use to find common ground is our attitude. Now, I consider myself a pretty positive guy, and I find myself attracted to other people who have that same positive attitude. And on the contrary, I tend to steer away from people who have a negative vibe to them. You guys know what I'm talking about. These are the people who always have that negative spin on things. They just have this permanent negative outlook. You ask them, hey, how's it going? And their response is something negative like, it could be better, or, oh, I've been better. Man, when somebody asks me how I am, I always say, man, if I was any better, I'd be twins. See the difference in those responses? Attitude's contagious. Have you noticed that? As soon as I say that to people, I see them shift. A smile appears on their face, and they say something like, wow, I like that. Or dang, that's pretty good. I was walking into the shop ed on base the other day, and I was passing a lady. She was coming out as I was going in. I'm like, hey, good morning. How you doing? She's like, fine. How are you? And I turned around as I'm passing her. I'm like, man, if I was any better, I'd be twins. And she literally stopped and she turned around. She's like, that was amazing. I love that response. It's contagious having a positive attitude. If you have a good attitude, you'll attract others with the same attitude. Nobody likes to be sucked into a negative space. Negativity is like quicksand. As soon as you step into it, you start to clamor your way out, desperately trying to get away from it. Okay, one of the other ways that we can connect, or a place where we tend to migrate, towards others are those who have similar backgrounds than we do. This is really huge, actually. Where you're from is one of your characteristics, and it can be one that attracts others who are similar to you. Now, two examples I can think of right away are people in the military. We tend to migrate to each other very quickly. We know we can pick you out in a crowd and we migrate to each other. And then the other one that sticks out in my mind right away are people who share the same culture. See, when I see somebody who served in the Navy, I'm automatically connecting with them on that premise. Oh, you've been in the Navy. I was in the Navy. That's a point of connection. When people see that I served in the Navy, I'll get messages on LinkedIn all the time from people who have served, and they're like, hey, I saw your time in the Navy. What did you do? And that's their way of trying to connect. Or I'll get messages from people who have family members who have served either in the military in general or specifically in the Navy. That's their way of connecting. And then I mentioned, this being a part of culture, right? My brother, he lives in a suburb of Detroit, Michigan. And I used to visit him in the summertime when I was younger. And one of the places he loved to take me every time I would visit, we'd go to downtown Detroit and he would take me to Greektown. Greektown was a section in Detroit where the Greeks all migrated and formed their own little community. And that's where you went to get authentic Greek food. They had Greek festivals. It was a place where you could immerse yourself in the Greek culture. How many places do you know that have an area called Little Italy, right? We've heard it before. The East Coast is full of those areas because that's where a lot of the immigrants from Italy settled in the New World, right? And what about the Irish in Boston? People attract and are attracted to people with similar backgrounds like their own. The list can go on and on, from geography to education to wealth, so on and so on and so on. All right, I know this is going to come as a complete shock to some of you, but one of the characteristics where I'm able to find common ground is energy levels. I've been told on several occasions that I have high energy. Sometimes I get comments like, man, I want some of what he's having. I'm just natural high energy. As a kid, I was hyperactive. And over the years, I've been able to focus that energy into a sustained high level of energy. And because of that, I am attracted to and tend to attract others who also have high energy levels. Now, this one can be a blessing and a curse at the same time. First of all, high energy levels are extremely hard to sustain for long periods of time. So when high energy people crash, we crash pretty hard. We withdraw. Sometimes that can be taken as being in a bad mood or being moody, but really it's just us recharging our batteries. It's that downtime. We got to plug in, we got to center ourselves, recharge, and then boom, Energizer bunny time. And consistent high energy can also be draining to others who don't have that same energy level, right? It kind of acts like a repellent to negativity, which is good in some senses. But if you're just not a higher energy person, really high energy can kind of put people off. They're just like, I can't keep up. You're actually draining my energy. High energy people and low energy people, they're like oil and water. So this is another characteristic that I have, and it's something that tends to attract others to me. Okay, so far I've mentioned a few characteristics that we can have that allow us to attract others based on commonality or common ground, something we share in common with them. They're used as points of connection. Let's see, I mentioned our age. We tend to attract people who are similar in age. I don't attract 20-year-old people. I attract 40 plus people. Although there are outliers, they are the exceptions to the rule. Okay, let's see. I also mentioned your attitude, right? When it comes to attitude, we're definitely not magnets. Opposites do not attract. Actually, they repel. Our background, that was another big one. Where we come from, what group of people we belong to. All of that plays a part in attracting others who are similar to us in that regard. And then the last one that I wanted to mention is about leadership. I mean, of course, right? This is concepts in the foundations of leadership. And our ability when it comes to leadership, that's also another indicator of what type of leaders we'll attract into our circles, onto our teams, in life, personally and professionally. A few weeks ago, I was talking about how people are naturally attracted to strong leaders, right? But at the same time, where you are in your abilities as a leader also plays a factor in the types of the leaders that you're going to attract. Now, if you have strong leadership abilities now, you're going to attract leaders who are close to you in those abilities. Makes sense, right? They will never be stronger than you, because if they were stronger than you, you'd be following them, not the other way around, right? You remember that lesson? Okay. Let's stop here for a second. I just want to recap because I want to make sure you're taking away the concept of this lesson. So let's recap real quick. This concept is about our character and how our character dictates who surrounds us, who is naturally attracted to us. Like attracts like. I talked about several characteristics that are commonly used as ways of finding common ground with others. Now, at this point, you may find yourself in one of two camps. You're either thinking, man, I'm not too sure I'm attracting the right people as you think about who's in your circles and who you're hanging out with. If you're thinking now about who you've been surrounding yourself with on a consistent basis and you're questioning who they are and why you attracted them, then you needn't look any further than your own character. What is it saying about you? Is it possible to develop stronger character traits? Yes, it's possible, but not easy to do. But if you're willing to put in the work to do it, you'll not only see a change in the types of people you're attracting, but you'll see changes in all aspects of your life. Now, the second camp might be you're thinking, I'm doing great. I love the people I'm attracting. These are my people. If that's you, then great. Great job, you guys. You're on the right path. It says a lot about the strength of your character. And think about what character traits you're displaying that are attracting those types of people. Hey, here's the exercise I mentioned earlier. I want you to do this. You can either do it now or go back and replay this and do it later on your own time whenever you have a chance. But I want you to think about 3 people. Think of 3 people right now that are close to you, that you hang around with the most, that are maybe even in your inner circle. And on a sheet of paper, I want you to write down their name, and then underneath their name on one side of the paper, write down all of the characteristics that you can think about them, the things you admire about them. What is it about them that attracts you to them? Make a list. Maybe it's 2 things, maybe it's 5 things, I don't know. Whatever comes to your mind right away, write them down. Now on that same sheet of paper, write down some of the things on the other side of the paper that make them just a little different than you. Now, believe me, there are going to be some things to write down. Remember, we're all different. They're not carbon copies of you. So both sides of the paper should have something written down under each one of those names. Now, there's a good possibility when you look at that list, there are very few differences and much more characteristics that you admire. And by the way, the characteristics that you've listed for each one of those 3 people, the ones that are common, circle them. If you had loyalty listed for all 3, circle that. Put a circle around each one of them and identify the traits you listed that are common amongst all 3 people. Guess what? You just made a list of your strongest character traits, because who you are is who you attract. I know, mind blown. Hey, make sure you guys go through that exercise. It's a pretty cool little exercise, and I think you're going to be blown away by the results of it. It's just a fun little thing to do. Okay, you guys, that's going to do it for yet another week in the Lion's Den, another concept for you in the foundations of leadership. I want to ask you guys a favor, please. If you like what you're seeing each week here in the Lion's Den on the Weekly Roar, would you mind sharing out my videos to your groups on your pages? I'd really appreciate the share out to help me get my message out to more people. I want to impact them and help them on their growth journeys. And if you would please share this out and put a note on your post why you're sharing it. Now, I repost this video in a new post following the watch party. So there's going to be another post with just the video. That's the post that you can use to share out if you feel so inclined to do it. But I would really appreciate your help in doing that. Thank you so much. Also, do not forget to leave your thoughts and comments. I love hearing from you and what you're thinking about this topic. Like, listen, my word's not the end all be all. These are my thoughts on the concepts of the foundations of leadership. This is what I believe, and this is what I'm thinking about. Maybe you think the same thing, and great. Maybe you have a different perspective on it. I'd love to hear that too. Change is good, and a difference of opinions even better, because it helps us to grow. All right, you guys, thanks so much for tuning in again this week for another weekly roar. I appreciate you guys more than you know. Hey, listen, next week, guess what? I'm back here again, same place, same time, to speak about another concept in the foundations of leadership. Next week, I'm talking about one of my all-time favorite subjects. It's the concept of taking our communication to the next level. And that's actually establishing a connection with others. As John Maxwell says, we have to touch a heart before we can ask for a hand. All right, everybody, until next week, remember, be powerful, but stay poised just like a lion. Bye, everybody.
Thanks for watching the Weekly Roar live event at lionenterprise.com. If you enjoyed this video, please tell others to join us each week here in the Lion's Den. Thanks again, and see you next week.